These two books is they have lots of songs with words, so kids who love singing are going to really enjoy these two books. The Joan Thompson, I found that boys tend to like it more, especially boys who don't like singing so much, because it has less songs with words, but it has some very funky tunes. So the books are similar in difficulty, but they are different in style. Now, having said that, let me start on the books individually. So these were my overall views on these books, and now I'm going to talk about each book, what are the pros and cons, and what you can get in the series, and then hopefully that should help you to decide which one suits you best. So let's start with number one, the Joan Thompson Easiest Piano Course. So this is my most popular piano book for young beginners. Despite a few cons that the book has, I think all of my students really loved it, and the book features these little monsters all the way through, and kids really love looking at the monsters and trying to figure out what they do. Now, as you can see, the book has very big print or staves notation, which is very good for the young beginner because you've got enough space to put notes in, and it also makes it easier for them to read. Now, this series consists, I think, of 8 books, but the first 4 are the most popular ones. Not many people use 5, 6, 7, and 8. It's a very old piano course. It's been here for decades, and this is the newer version. It's the same songs, but more updated graphics and just a nicer layout. To be honest, I've never used book 3 and book 4 when it comes to this. I'm only using book 1 and book 2, and when I finish book 2 with the students, I usually transfer them to a different piano method, which is more engaging, because what I find is that the first 2 books are very good to teach the basics, but once you get to book 3, 4, 5, 6, it becomes extremely dry and very outdated and old-fashioned. So then I tend to switch to something like Piano Time or Piano Adventures, which is one of my favorites for the older beginner. What I also like about this book is that it starts with hands together from lesson 1, and it starts with notation from lesson 1, and that's going to help children learn notation very quickly and coordinate the 2 hands. In the first book, you are going to learn about the basic note values and playing hands together, but the disadvantage of this book is that the first book doesn't really touch at all articulation, dynamics, and expression marks, and there is no theory book for it, and there is no technique book. Now, you've got some supplementary books which are like pop tunes and Christmas tunes, and also there are some worksheets inside the book, and you've also got a few finger drills. The songs also come with lots of very nice accompaniment, so even if it's a very simple kind of boring sounding song, with the accompaniment is going to sound quite nice and funky. Let's move on to Tunes for 10 Fingers. This is by Oxford, if I'm not mistaken, and by Pauline Hall. So she has 2 series, one is Tunes for 10 Fingers and the other one is Piano Time for the older beginner. Now, these books are very pretty inside, very nice, kind of soft drawings, not scary at all. How it works is you've got 2 books, 1 and 2, and after that there is nothing, so you have to transfer your kids to a different piano method, and it unfortunately does not have any supplementary books like Christmas books or tunes or theory or performance or anything like that. So it's only the lesson book. The book starts with some basic rhythms, and then you start learning a couple of notes with the right hand, and a few pages later you start learning a few notes with the left hand, and then very soon you're going to be playing hands together. All of the songs in this book have words, so kids who love singing are going to absolutely adore it. Not all of the songs are very pretty, but most of them are quite singable, and it has lots of nursery rhymes and famous tunes as well. The book, unlike the Joan Thompson, introduces quavers, articulation and dynamics in the very first book, so it gives you a more rounded piano technique in the very first book, despite the fact that you play quite a lot separate hands. And of course, as you could see, the book starts with notation from lesson 1, so you don't play by numbers, and you're going to learn to read music from day 1. Now, some few disadvantages of this book are that the notation is a little bit smaller than in the Joan Thompson, so it's going to be harder to read for very small children. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit smaller. So, and the pages, as you can see, look quite busy, so there's a lot of things to distract the attention of the young beginner. Similarly to the Joan Thompson book, it stays in the 5-finger position all the way through, which I know many people think is a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, because when you're a young beginner, it's much easier to focus keeping your hands in the same place. I know there is a big group of piano teachers who like going away from the 5-finger position as soon as possible, and others like to stay in it. I don't mind whichever system works. The biggest disadvantage of this book is that it doesn't have any technical drills and it doesn't have any theory sheets at all. So no supplementary books for music theory and no worksheets inside the book. The next one on the list is Chester's Easiest Piano Course. To be honest, I haven't used this book too much, and the reason is it's because it's almost completely identical to the Joan Thompson book. So whichever you use, it's kind of the same outcome and the same structure, same layout. If you look at this book, the little monsters are replaced by the frog who is teaching you all the lessons. It has the same big notation and it has very similar songs, and it starts with notation from lesson 1. So you're going to play on 2 staves and you're going to read notes from lesson 1. So the only reason why I picked up this book now is because it's a new special edition, and the special edition combines the lesson book with worksheets and also technique or technical exercises. So if you get this version of the Chester, I think it's definitely better than the Joan Thompson. But if you don't get the special edition, then it's kind of the same thing. So whichever you choose is going to be the same results. This book doesn't deal with articulation, staccato, legato. It doesn't introduce quavers in the first book. However, there is some dynamics in the end, so you're going to learn about loud, quiet, and medium loud playing. This book stays in the 5-finger position as well, so if that's not something that you want, then stay away from the Chester Easiest Piano Course. And on the plus side, it has lots of supplementary books as well. There are theory books, there are sight reading books, technique books, and tunes as well, pop tunes, Christmas tunes, and so on. So lots of song books as well. It's a well-rounded approach for the young beginner. Next one on the list is Me and My Piano, which is again a very popular piano course in the United Kingdom, and I think in many other places as well. This one is a special edition which combines book 1 and book 2 because the series only has 2 books. Unfortunately, there are no technical books, no music theory, and no sight reading books to accompany the method. You've got some duet books and some super scales and some extra songs in a book, but it's very, very limited compared to the other methods. Now, what I like about this book again is that it starts with notation from day 1, and it has very nice drawings, and it introduces one note at a time. Now again, the notation is slightly smaller than in the Chester and Joan Thompson, so might not be the best for a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, but it's still possible. I've done it in the past. And the great thing about this book is that all of the songs have words, and many of them are really, really pretty, and children love singing them. The book covers dynamics, articulation, and it also introduces quavers in the very first book, so you get quite a lot even in the first book, and it's not fast-paced. A couple more cons for this book. Again, it stays in the 5-finger position, so if that's a con for you, then don't go for it. And the second thing that I didn't like so much is that there's too much separate hands playing. So the first, I think, 10 pages is just right hand playing, and then another 10 pages is just the left hand playing and then playing hands together. I don't think that's necessary, because if a student comes to you for like 10 weeks, then are you going to just use the right hand for 10 weeks and then just the left hand for 10 weeks? That's not how piano tuition works. So what I usually do when I use this book is I play one song from each section and just jump a little bit back and forth until we get to the section where it's hands together. And that usually works better, and then obviously we can work a little bit on both hands on each lesson. The book also has nice accompaniments for songs, so very different but nice little accompaniments, and there are also some puzzles and worksheets here and there, but there's no separate music theory book. Next one on the list is Alfred's Basic Piano Library. I think this is probably the most popular book in the United States and also around the world. It has so many things in the series. You've got, I think, 6 levels, and for each level you've got a lesson book, you've got a sight reading book, you've got a theory book, you've got a performance book, and you've got lots of supplementary books for pop songs, hits, classics, favourites, Christmas songs, and so on. So the choice and the material is abundant. You can choose anything you want. As I said, asking parents to buy 4 books for each level might be a stretch sometimes, especially if parents see that we can't get through the entire book. So what I would do with these books is just pick the most important 2 books, maybe music theory and the lesson book, and then give them some extra technical work every now and then when you have the time in that 30-minute lesson. If you have a longer lesson, a 1-hour lesson, then you can definitely go for all 4 books if the parents don't mind it. This book starts with a lot of playing by numbers, which, as I said in the intro, is not a bad thing, but it's not something that I enjoy doing with the kids. If you do enjoy that, then it's a lot of fun, because you can play a lot of songs in the first few lessons without learning any notation at all. But the accompaniments make the songs very fun, and the drawings are quite cute as well. The book is a little bit old-fashioned. It hasn't been refreshed in a very long time. It's been here for decades as well. And from the middle of the book, you start playing from notation, and then the songs start coming, and they all have words as well. The first book doesn't introduce quavers, but it does introduce articulation and dynamics, so again it gives you a more rounded piano knowledge even in the first primer book. This book also encourages interval reading, so you'll see in many of the songs in the first half of the book you are going to read the music by looking at intervals, seconds, thirds. So there's a song which is full of seconds, then another song which is full of thirds, fourths, and so on. I think that's amazing, because many kids try to work out each note separately when you can just follow the intervals and fix a couple of notes in the score, some clue notes. So I really love the interval reading approach in this book. This one stays in the 5-finger position as well, so if that's not your thing, then this book is not yours again. Next one is going to be Alfred's Premier Piano course, which is technically the same as the other one in a very modern look, and it also has a couple of improvements to the method. So as I said, this moves away from the 5-finger position. You are going to move your hand, and it also teaches by intervals. As you can see, this book starts with playing by numbers as well, and just practicing rhythms on their own. And from the second half of the book, you start playing from notation. The drawings are quite cute, and the accompaniments are really great. The songs are fun, and it's nicely laid out. You've got quite a lot of space around. There's not too much distraction for the young beginner. You've got lots of material for these books. These are the supplementary books that you can get. So for each level, just like in the standard course, you've got theory, you've got performance, you've got technique and artistry, and sight reading, and then you've got all the song books. I think this one goes up to level 6, which is around grade 3 standard. What I didn't like so much about this book, besides the lots of playing by numbers, is that the songs, I don't find them very singable and fun. They are not the traditional tunes that you are used to from other books, and I know some teachers might find it a relief not to listen to those songs over and over again. But when you make up random songs that don't really sound like songs, you just try to put words to random notes, like jumping fifths, then I don't think the kids will enjoy it as much. When I played through this book and tried to sing along, I didn't like them so much either. The songs get much better in the second and third book, but I think for a very first book, for a primer book, for a young beginner, the Joan Thompson or Me and My Piano have much nicer songs than the Alfred's course. Next one is the Bastion piano method. It's almost identical in structure to the Alfred and the Alfred Premier course. It has lots of books for each level. You've got technique, you've got performance, sight reading, and music theory, and you also have a lot of supplementary books. So the same kind of idea structure-wise. However, when you look at the book, it has more of an old-school look. This one hasn't been refreshed a lot in the past decades either, but it's a very, very popular piano method. And this is actually level 1. It has a primer level, and the songs in this one are quite nice. Now the primer book again starts with lots of playing by numbers, and you've got one primer for the 6-7-year-olds, and if somebody's very young, like 4 or 5-year-old, the primer can be broken down into 2 primers, primer A, primer B, which is a lot slower paced. The primer book introduces articulation, dynamics, and accidentals as well, so it gives you quite a lot in the first book. It has nice tunes, nice accompaniments, but it stays again in the 5-finger position. There are no accompaniments, and also the pages looked a little bit too crowded for me, just like in some of the previous books. I think for a very young beginner it's important that the page looks kind of clean, because the more things there are to distract the attention, the harder it's going to be to keep them focused on the songs. Next one is the world famous Piano Adventures. Now I have to admit, this is the only one from the American series that I use on a daily basis and that I absolutely love. So it follows the same idea, but in a very new, modern kind of packaging. So this comes in many levels, from primer all the way to level 5, and for each level you've got, again, lesson book, theory, performance and sight reading, and you've got hundreds of song books for each level, and I absolutely love the songs in those books. And even if I don't teach somebody from the Piano Adventures lesson book, I still use the supplementary books to give them songs for Christmas, or give them some pop tunes or other classical favorites. So if you don't want to use this book, definitely have a look at the supplementary books, because the songs are so pretty. When it comes to Piano Adventures, what I find is that the primer book, again, spends way too much time on playing by numbers, which I just feel like sometimes it's a waste of time, because you don't get to notation until you get to like lesson 15 or lesson 20. If you have a very young beginner, like 4 or 5-year-old, they have an option where you can break down the primer book into 3 levels. Primer A, B and C, and that's going to be very slow paced. But if you just want to play games with small children, musical games, then those books are perfect for that. The graphics in these books are very cute, and the songs, most of them are quite pretty. The accompaniments are very enjoyable, and this book moves away from the 5-finger position. So even in the primer and the first book, you're not going to just play in the C major 5-finger position. You're going to move away, which encourages looking at intervals and looking at notes, not just finger numbers. Having said that, I have never used the primer book with any kids, because I prefer the Joan Thompson and Me and My Piano. I think the primer book songs are not very interesting compared to the songs that come in level 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Probably it's because there's less notes to work with in the primer book, but also, as I said, it spends way too much time on playing by numbers. And what I usually do is I start my students on the Joan Thompson or Me and My Piano, and when they finish the second book of those series, I'm going to transfer them onto Piano Adventures 2 or Piano Adventures 1B, so whichever fits their abilities better. So I love these books and I use them every day for the higher levels, but I wouldn't use it for the primer level. One more from the traditional series. This is the Whole Leonard Piano Library from America again, and this is almost completely identical in structure to the other ones, the Alfred and the Bastion. It has the same kind of book structure: lesson book, theory book, artistry book, sight reading book, technique book, and supplementary books for songs. So lots of material to choose from, and it goes from book 1 until I think book 5. And the first primer book again starts with a lot of playing by numbers, but as you can see, the book is laid out really well. It's very big notation and not very busy pages, and the kids can easily put notes into the notation, and there's not many things that could distract them from the songs. Comparing it to the other American methods, I think this one is a little bit slower in the primer book. You don't get anything on articulation, you don't get quavers, you don't get dynamics, and the songs are a lot easier than in the Alfred or the Bastion book. Personally, I've never used this series with anybody, but I did have a look at all the books, I played through the songs, but it just didn't seem like a good choice for me when you've got so many other great books. The last one I want to talk about is the Langlang Piano Academy. Now this one is probably the least popular on all platforms in the United States and in the UK as well. I really wanted to have a look at this book because even the cover is just so nice. The graphics in this book are amazing. It's so modern, and I think it really appeals to kids who like these cartoons, because it's not so many other great books. The last one I want to talk about is the Langlang Piano Academy. Now this one is probably the least popular on all platforms in the United States and in the UK as well. I really wanted to have a look at this book because even the cover is just so nice. The graphics in this book are amazing. It's so modern, and I think it really appeals to kids who like these cartoons because it's not silly drawings, it's not the kind of 70s looking drawings, it's animation drawings, and I think kids nowadays, after watching so much YouTube and all these modern cartoons, would prefer to see drawings like this one. Now the problem with this book is that I wouldn't call this a piano method. This one looks like a technique book to me that I would use as a supplementary book for a beginner. But if you look at this book, on the very first lesson it starts with that. So technical exercises, very small notation, no introduction whatsoever, what the notes are, how to play the piano or anything like that. And this is the book all the way to the end. So lots of drills. None of the songs have any words at all, so you can't sing along. There are a couple of worksheets and a couple of sight reading exercises, but it's definitely not a piano method for a beginner in the sense that the other books are. So you can't use this book on its own, you need to get something else. However, the exercises in it are very good for technique, so if you use them as a supplementary book, then it's going to give you very valuable skills. But I wouldn't use this book in the very first few lessons of a very young beginner because it's a bit too difficult for them and it's very dense. But I really wanted to mention this book as well because it's out there and it has valuable material in it, but it's just not a method book as such. So that was the end of my review of piano books for young beginners. I think it was very dense and I tried to say as much information about these books as I could, and as you can see, some of the things that are a con to me might not necessarily be a con to you, and some of the things that are an advantage to me or some of the things that I liked about these books you might not like so much. My last advice again is to get at least 2-3 methods if you have lots of beginners, to make sure that you don't listen to the same songs all the time and to match the books to the students' abilities and the students' personality. If you have any questions about these books or things that I forgot to talk about, leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them and update this video. In the next one I'm going to talk about the beginner books for the older beginner, so 8 to 12-year-olds, and then I'm going to do another video which is going to be for the adult beginner because those books are very different. And there is a big difficulty when choosing books for adults because there are so many on Amazon now and you don't know what to go for. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, subscribe for more.
發現裏面咧特別有幾首歌咧係非常之前嘅。點樣用一個8級嘅佈局上演奏級，淨係用10分鐘嘅 program 咧就可以去考演奏級啦。扣分位係少啲啦，然後 workload 係細啲嘅，咁令到咧成個過程咧係輕鬆啲嘅。
Hello， 大家好，我係 Toto。如果你中意呢個片嘅話咧，麻煩讚好、訂閱、再分享。如果唔係嘅話，一 like。
Hello， 大家好，歡迎嚟到名門音樂，我係全老師。咁咧近嚟咧有好多家長最短嘅時間內考到8級。經過呢1年嚟嘅新 syllabus 咧8級啦，唔同嘅學生啦揀咗唔同嘅8級考試歌啦。咁當然我哋揾出咗最佳嘅考試路線啦。由於咧有部分學生咧係以8級為終點站嘅，但係亦都同時係有另一批學生咧佢哋係想考演奏級嘅。咁所以咧內容咧係會有少少唔同嘅，我會分為上集同下集咧去講呢個8級最佳嘅佈局方法嘅。如果以呢個8級為終點站嘅學生咧，我哋主要咧係會揀4首好容易嘅考試歌，扣分位係少啲啦，然後 workload 係細啲嘅，咁令到咧成個過程咧係輕鬆啲嘅。如果係會打算考演奏級嘅學生咧，其實係會係揀另一啲歌，咁咧希望咧上到去演奏級嘅時候咧，就可以去考呢個演奏級嘅考試啦。有興趣咧聽埋下集點樣8級上演奏級咧，只係需要準備10分鐘 program 嘅朋友咧，可以咧訂閱我個頻道，咁我將會喺下一集咧。我要喺度提大家，其實咧9月份咧個 program form 咧，即係揸住嗰張紙咧，已經開始改變咗啦。咁為咗咧小心咧 ABRSM 咧有權去 DQ 你呢個 ABRSM 嘅 exam 考試咧，咁咧就要用一個最新嘅 program form 啦。咁如果有需要嘅學生咧，可以喺課下邊放咗一條 Google link 嘅俾大家去 download 翻呢個 program form。要考好一個8級咧，其實都唔係咁容易嘅。咁你總會聽到身邊咧會有人唔合格啦。甚至乎，我試咗幾次，最後先合格，或者係畢竟咧考官咧係喺一個1至4級嘅時候咧，佢哋會咁而去到5到8級咧，其實屬於中高階嘅時候咧，考官咧就會認真去睇究竟你有邊啲問題，或者你有一啲技術技巧係未能夠達到嗰個級數咧。咁當然啦，隨住級數上升嘅話咧，其實唔合格嘅比率咧，亦都係越嚟越高嘅。咁咧，以下咧，我會帶大家去睇一睇啲琴譜嘅。講到咧8級考試啦，一定會有家長學生成日會問：喂，有冇啲容易啲嘅8級考試歌俾我哋啊？咁考試成日都好忙，功課都好忙，會唔會有啲8級係輕鬆啲，令到個過程咧就順暢嘅？咁啊，考到8級又可以高分咧？咁當然咧，如果你睇晒30份琴譜 A1 至10、B1 至10同埋 C1 至10咧，你會發現非常之前嘅。咁先嚟做一個測試先。嗱，我會放3份嘅樂譜啦，咁俾大家去睇。左邊啦、中間啦、右邊係比較易啲嘅咧，咁啊冇錯啊！你會見到咧，其實咧圖裏邊咧有2首咧比較複雜。咁我唔係我特登去抽出嚟嘅，係如果你細心啲發現咧，當然啦7級。睇真啲唔同嘅琴譜咧，你會發現咧啲琴譜係好淺嘅，有額外嘅1-2首歌。咁唔使講啊，大家睇圖都見到啊，就算唔識音樂，你見到個密度咧，嗰啲音符嘅密度，你見到佢係呢2首歌咧係比另外一首歌咧，有一首歌好淺喎，得幾粒音咁嘅款喎，冇錯，佢哋呢2首咁難嘅。都係7級嘅考試歌，而你覺得睇落好簡單嗰首，反而係8級嘅考試歌。當然啦，8級嘅考試歌咧，其實咧揭落去咧，全部都係睇落都好複雜㗎啦。如果你細心啲發現嘅話咧，你會發現到咧有一啲歌咧，佢哋嘅程度咧只係得5級到7級嘅啫，係非常之容易令到你嘅8級考試過程咧輕鬆。咁我哋咧就睇下咧今屆嘅8級考試歌有邊啲歌咧？ 歌咧，學生咧係需要避開嘅，因為實在太多容易俾人扣分嘅位置啦。咁我哋一齊去片。咁我哋繼續睇下呢30首歌啦 ，A 嘅10首歌啦 ，B 10首歌同埋 C 10首歌啦。咁喺呢度咧，再一次恭喜啱啱收到最新嘅消息咧，移民咗英國嘅 Miranda 啦，咁佢7歲人完成咗8級，佢係攞咗一個好高分嘅 distinction 嘅。